Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Operation DarkStar, the finale by Mark Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 51. He could barely see through the sweat and grime in his vision. He used the sleeve of his coat to wipe at his eyes, desperation making him jumpy. He had run out of ammunition over 5 minutes ago and had resorted to using a World War I bayonet that Vulcan had manufactured 2 years earlier to fit the end of his rifle. Saul liked the foot-long blade and had joked that if they were ever stuck in an Alamo-type situation, he would use the bayonet to fight to the death. He was a man who liked to be prepared, although he had hoped that he would never need it. He hadn't seen any monsters for close to a minute. However, the claustrophobic conditions of the maintenance tunnel were amplifying every sound and making his paranoia kick into hyperdrive. The biker tightened up the final screw and surveyed his work with complete and utter pessimistic scrutiny. With the age and disrepair of the generator, the odds of it starting up at all were extremely small, but if, on the off chance that it was capable of working, he didn't want it to fail because of something he had done or not done. Producing a circuit tester from his bag, he used the probes from the machine to systematically go through each circuit, ensuring the amps and voltage were in the correct digital multimeters from the index on the inside of the generator door. This procedure took longer than he hoped, but he wasn't going to leave this to chance. As he conducted the check, his mind was reeling with thoughts of the others and how they were coping with their respective tasks, in particular Saul. Listening to the former detective had been hard for him. Hearing the gunshots and sounds of battle the police officer had been performing on his behalf had been rough, but not as hard as hearing the deafening silence that followed. Chapter 52. She had never felt as vulnerable as she did now. 30 meters from her intended destination, dangling from a steel cable with no firearm and surrounded by a demon horde from a hell dimension. Attempting to block out the dangers around her, she focused on the large black sphere below when a maddening roar broke her concentration. Peering back out to the platform and steel stairwell, she could see Basul clinging to the side of the steel bracing, and his gaze was firmly on her. Eyes smoldered with glowing intensity, crackling like a campfire. They warned of arcane fury that now was focused solely on her. "Give me the shard," Basul growled, his hand outstretched despite the vast distance. Her own hand dropped instinctively towards her pocket. The true weight of her responsibility made the tiny sliver of rock feel like the literal weight of the world. The shard. "Give it to me and your reward will be beyond anything this world could dream up," Basul said seductively. She didn't know if it was some kind of power he was exuding over her, or just fear and fatigue. But inside her soul there was a small piece of ice that wanted to believe the demon, a part that just wanted to do as he said, and then go and sleep undisturbed for a year. A movement on the top of the platform caught her gaze. Scott was fighting demons and monsters as Gates operated her pulley system. The numbers were overwhelmingly against him, yet the ex-Delta fought with every fiber of his being, armed only with 2 knives. He was holding his own, however he couldn't last forever. In that moment, the spell was broken. Memories of the past 8 years came flooding back. People she had grown to love, friends she had lost. Friends that were now risking everything, depending on her to complete the mission. Resolve filled her body, and she did the only thing she could think of. Turning towards Basul, she flipped the Demon King the bird. He roared with battle rage. They were everywhere. Monsters and horrors from the deepest parts of the black abyss. There was nothing fancy in his fighting style. He was now running on pure animal instinct, a literal fighting machine. Every movement resulted in a kill. Gates dropped to the steel floor, screaming, his hands covering his eyes and ears, trying to block out the world around him. Her descent stopped with a sudden jolt, and she knew why immediately. They were completely besieged, and nothing she could do from her end was going to change anything up there. But down here, she whispered, and realized what she had to do. Removing a small, serrated knife from a zippered pocket on her vest, she held the curved edge to the thick paracord strap looped through the carabiner, which was holding her in place. Pausing, Sarah willed herself to be strong. She knew that in a few moments, one way or another, it would be all over. And with that in mind, she pressed the edge and cut through the cord. The drop to the black sphere was easily over 6 meters, and her target was onto an uneven stone landing. Even in the best of conditions, a fall from such a height could lead to massive trauma or death. When the ex-paramedic fell, Basul screamed in helpless rage, and Scott was overrun. Trying to right herself to gain the best possible landing, which was never going to happen. Her body struck the meteor with the speed of a person colliding with a wall at a fast sprint. Both ankles and her right wrist were snapped immediately on impact. She rolled awkwardly as a scream of pain erupted from her lungs. Chapter 53. He had become completely self-aware. Most of his life had been focused on his needs. Survival, really. Dealing with a crap hand that being born on the wrong side of the tracks can only explain. Horrible and abusive parents. Then spending his formative years surrounded by violent and deceptive people only interested in what others could do for them. It turned out rather ironic that it took an apocalypse to occur, for Bam Bam to give a shit about his fellow man, in particular those he fought side by side with, individuals from different walks of life. A close friendship with a former police officer like Saul, and the love of his life waiting back at the bunker for his safe return. His heart lifted slightly at the thought of Molly. The former biker's hand was resting on the arming lever of the generator. It was all or nothing time, and for the first real time in his life, he was afraid. What if? Flashing like neon in his mind's eye. "What are you waiting for?" a voice called out. So focused on what he was doing, Bam Bam failed to hear Saul approach. Covered in black blood and almost weary beyond the ability to stand, the ex-detective limped into the narrow passageway and sat down hard on the steel floor. "I'm glad to see you, Copper," Bam Bam smirked. "That makes one of us," Saul chuckled, which turned into a coughing fit. He spat out dark red blood. "Hurt?" Bam Bam asked. "Only when I move, or breathe," Saul replied. The biker sighed. "If we're successful, what happens?" Bam Bam asked. "Does it matter?" Saul asked. "It does for Molly and Kira and everyone else living in the bunker," Bam Bam reasoned. "I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think Booth or Gates do either. All I know is that this was never supposed to happen. If left unchecked, everyone we know and love will die, probably in horrible ways. This is a Hail Mary mission. Damn us to hell if we don't at least try," Saul said. The biker looked relieved. "I'm glad you said that. I needed to hear it. Did you plan that speech, or was it off the cuff?" Bam Bam queried with a grin. "I was a police officer, Bruce. I'm an expert at bullshitting," Saul replied with a grin. "For Jordan," Bam Bam said, and pulled down on the generator handle. Chapter 54. She sat up and whimpered. The pain in her body was excruciating. It took her several long seconds to orientate herself. She wasn't even sure if she'd passed out or not. Time and reality didn't seem quite real at the moment. Then the gravity of her situation struck home, full force. Her gaze went directly to the platform, which now was completely covered in a dark sea of monstrous forms. Scott was dead. She didn't know what was worse, her crippled body or the fact that she was now all alone. She tried to wipe away the tears that were forming when white-hot pain shot up her arm. She jerked back and collapsed on her back, the tears now running freely. She could feel the vibrations of the ancient black rock coursing through her body. It felt alive. She couldn't stop now. She was so close. Her head rolled around to one side, and she could see Basul leap from his position up top of the platform and land easily on the ground 100 meters below. With everyone gone, she was the last enemy it had to defeat. Basul made its way directly towards her. "Get up," Sarah whispered to herself. Straining, she rolled over onto her stomach and peered around. Then the true problem presented itself to her. The sliver of rock that needed to be inserted was the size of a moth's wing. Looking around, she had to find an almost paper-thin crack in the meteor's vast surface where the shard needed to be inserted. Her vision half blurred. It all looked like one big black surface. Frantically, Sarah looked from left to right. In the background, she could hear the Demon King's heavy footsteps getting louder. "No!" she panicked, trying to find the one thing she hoped would end this nightmare once and for all. "Broken and lost. I can't believe that for a brief moment you posed a threat towards me." Basul chuckled. "Humanity is so fragile," he added, walking up casually towards the giant black sphere. Dread filled her bones. Trying to block out the demon's voice, she pulled herself along the smooth black surface, desperately hoping to find the tiny imperfection in its exterior, but finding nothing. The moment the switch was thrown, he could feel a distant hum within its steel exterior. The mechanics slowly coming to life after years of unuse. "Is it?" Saul asked tentatively. Bam Bam ignored the question, one hand on the surface of the generator, attempting to feel what he hoped was the machine powering up. They waited with held breath. The generator let out a screeching whine that turned into a loud bang. There was a long, drawn-out silence, then a steady hum. The light next to the starter handle flashed green as the generator roared to life. Saul tossed something small into Bam Bam's lap. The biker picked up the narrow silver object and unscrewed the lid. "Don't tell me. That fancy whiskey, right?" Bam Bam asked as he took a sniff. "Hardly. I'm not wasting any more of the good stuff on your unrefined palate." "It's rum," Saul replied, indicating with a finger that he drink up and toss it back. "When will we know if they're successful?" Bam Bam asked, downing a long swallow of the golden brown liquid. "I'm guessing never," Saul replied cryptically. Laying on her side, Sarah was about to close her eyes. What little energy she had was all but used up. The realization that she was never going to find the opening within the meteor a fact, and the Demon King Basul was about to throw her body to its army of darkness in waiting. As her vision began to fade, lights within the building started to spring to life, slowly illuminating the interior of the Wagner Institute. The ex-paramedic turned her face towards the blinking floodlight that was trying to bathe the meteor within its faded glow. "What?" Basul growled, confused. Sarah blinked from the sudden blinding light as she turned her head away and stared at a bright blue spark fizzing off to her side. Something on the meteor's surface had been activated by the sudden eruption of power. "They fucking did it," Sarah whispered to herself. With a renewed surge of energy, she half rolled, half crawled towards the spark of power, and as she did so, removed the small black bag in her pocket and gripped the tiny shard within. The Demon King sensed the worst, as it leapt onto the top of the large black sphere, its intent to rip the woman's spine from her body. Instead, it was confronted by the sight of Sarah, now half kneeling before the small fissure in the meteor, the black shard in her one good hand. Holding it high above her head, she turned her gaze towards Basul. "Fuck you, and the demon horde you rode in on." Sarah growled and plunged the shard into the fragmented slit of the meteor. Chapter 55. The reaction was instantaneous. The moment the shard clicked into place, blinding white light exploded from the sphere and enveloped everything it touched. Sarah had a brief moment of clarity, knowledge that it was all going to be all right. In the background, Basul's screams of pain and fear could be clearly heard as the light within the meteor went supernova and destroyed everything it touched. Flesh, rock, stone, and steel. Nothing could withstand the radiant glow as it incinerated everything around. Within the maintenance passageway, Saul and Bam Bam felt nothing as the light from the sphere destroyed their physical bodies, gone within the blink of an eye. The light continued to grow in pure blinding clarity and power until everything was consumed within its brilliance. Chapter 56. He sat bolt upright, a scream clenched tight in his throat, fists raised, ready to start swinging. Darkness met his vision. He could barely see a thing. Quickly jumping to his feet, he attempted to gain his bearing, and as his eyesight slowly became adjusted to his surroundings, Scott's jaw dropped open. To his right, he could see the glow of a faint red light. Carefully, he stepped closer to get a better look, realizing it was the gleam of numbers, 11:55. It was an alarm clock. It was his old alarm clock, before the portals had come and destroyed the world. "What is this?" Scott whispered shakily. He backed away from the dim light, fear and confusion consuming his thoughts. His back struck the wall behind, and he suppressed an urge to cry out. Instead, he turned and tripped on something in the darkness. Landing clumsily, he crawled, only stopping when he saw more light. Realizing it was a window, and the light emanating from it was the street outside. The Delta operator slowly picked himself up off the floor and moved cautiously towards it, allowing a sigh of relief when he saw the calm image of the city at night below. "Can this really be?" he stammered. His eyes widened. "Oh God." "No," he added, racing back into his bedroom when he saw the time on his alarm clock, 11:57. Wasting no time, he sprinted to the front door of his apartment, stopping only to grab the car keys sitting within a brass bowl on a stand, and disappeared out into the night. Chapter 57. The doctor blinked sharply at the unexpected red light, a whimpering scream bellowing from his mouth as he expected a demonic horde to rip him apart. Collapsing to his knees with hands raised protectively. It took him a minute to realize that there was no horde, and that he was not alone. Sobbing, he stood up, recognizing that he was standing on the metal platform overlooking his team of people busily preparing for the commencement of Operation DarkStar. His eyes went wild, spinning around. He could see the countdown clock was poised. 46. The machinery was already humming. The jagged piece of meteor was being lowered down. Only a few meters of space separated the fragment from the black sphere and the commencement of the apocalypse. 39. He grasped the microphone of the PA. "Stop! For God's sake, stop!" Gates screamed in desperation. This turned to dismay as he realized that the PA was not working and that the machinery below was drowning out his voice. He waved towards Dr. Morgan Mason, trying to get the man's attention. Hoping they would end the experiment, however, when Mason saw the waving Gates, he simply waved back, his attention on the meteor. 31. This can't be happening. Gates choked back a sob. He could see the fragment was less than a meter from the sphere. The experiment was going to happen, and only he knew the consequences. Biting his lip, he did the only thing he could and leapt from the short dais. 26. With no athletic ability, he misjudged the jump and collided with several technicians below, their bodies providing an adequate cushion from which to land. The scientist rolled to his feet, pushing away more people who had come to help. His goal was the sphere, and Dr. Mason, the only man now capable of stopping Armageddon. 17. Doctors, scientists, and technicians close to Gates had stopped what they were doing. Confused, they watched him running and screaming towards the black sphere. Hearing the commotion, Dr. Mason turned towards the noise with an expression of utter surprise. The cautious, reserved man he had known for years was gone. What he saw now was the face of a madman. 8. Stop! Gates screamed. The piece of black rock was only inches away from its intended destination, and in that one moment, he knew there was no time to explain. No time to get to the controls and halt the experiment. He only had one option and no time to plan. He changed course and pushed past the safety barrier to the left of the meteor. 5. Someone stop him! Mason bellowed in alarm. However, there was no one close. No time to realize the danger. Gates stood before the two power couplings, raw energy pouring in and out, just waiting for the jagged piece of black rock to enter the original, now only a few seconds from reconnecting. 2. He reached out with both hands and grasped the couplings in both hands. Millions of volts of pure electricity charged through his tiny body. Everything that was Samuel Gates was fried in an instant. At the same time, the feedback that poured back into the system was just as quick and merciless, creating an explosion that shorted out the entire building, which was immediately plunged into darkness. The jagged piece of black rock stopped short of the meteor, with only 2 millimeters of space between them. Clock stopping. 1. Chapter 58. A charcoal gray, 1967. Camaro SS pulled sharply into the car park of the Wagner Institute and skidded to a halt. Swinging the door open, Scott jumped out from his seat and raced on foot towards the main building, just as hundreds of people were quickly exiting through the main foyer. "I'm too late," Scott whispered, as he noticed that the building and area around them were in complete darkness. The people coming out were doing so in an orderly fashion, voices raised in confused discussion, but not crazed terror. "Scott!" a voice called out from the crowd, so faint he nearly dismissed it. "Scott!" He heard it again. Turning, he could see a figure pushing through the sea of people. It was continuing to call his name. Not caring how it looked, he raced to meet the figure. Scott! He could now see who the voice belonged to, only she was a lot younger, gray hair having not manifested itself yet. "Booth, is that you?" Scott replied, and the two figures embraced, like old friends. "It is you," Booth said with a warm smile. "Am I too late? Has it begun?" Scott pressed her, confused. "Yes, and no," she replied with a touch of sadness. She steered the Delta operator towards a private pocket of the car park. Away from prying ears, they sat down on the curb. "What's going on?" "The last thing I remember was fighting Basul and his demon horde. Then I woke up in my apartment." Minutes before the apocalypse, Scott hissed. "I remember dying in Rob's arms, then waking up here," Booth said, pointing to the building. Scott was about to flood her with questions, but she waved him silent. "From what I can surmise, we were successful in returning the shard to the meteor," Booth said. "We can thank Bam Bam and Sarah for that," Scott interjected. With the shard replaced, I think we were able to reverse time, exactly minutes before the experiment began, Booth said. And you stopped it? Scott asked, impressed, grabbing her arm and giving it a warm squeeze. Well, actually no. From eyewitness accounts, Gates tried to stop the experiment, and when that didn't work, he threw himself into the power supply, which caused the blackout. Booth said, pointing to the building now cloaked in darkness. Now I am impressed. Where is he so I can thank him personally? Scott asked, his eyes scanning the crowd for signs of the scientist. Like I said, he threw himself into the power supply. He died instantly. He made a conscious choice and sacrificed himself for the good of everyone, Booth said, her eyes brimming with tears. I'll be damned, Scott whispered in awe. Hopefully not, Booth said. That sat in silence for several minutes, letting the implications of what she had said wash over the both of them. Does everyone remember what happened? Scott asked. Booth shook her head. No, I don't believe so. I've only spoken to a few people, and from what I've heard, nobody knows a thing about our alternative timeline, Booth replied. Is that a good thing? Scott asked. She pondered his question. I think, because of our proximity to the meteor at the time of the shard being returned, it must have allowed us to retain our memories of true events, even in death. Gates's death has bought us a little time. Once an investigation into the accident is concluded, the bean counters will be quick to restart the experiment after all. In their minds, if they're successful, this could be worth billions, Booth said bitterly. Not if I have anything to do with it, Scott said through clenched teeth. Booth placed a hand on his arm. Not tonight. Protocol dictates that the meteor be placed under heavy guard, Booth said. How long? Scott asked. 2 weeks minimum before they resume, but like I said, they will have it under lock and key. They'll have professionals keeping it secure. It's too important to them. You'll never be able to pull it off alone, Booth said, upset. Scott smiled back. Well, it looks like I'll have to organize a team then, Scott replied. Chapter 59. They wasted no time, and with no sleep, they spent the entire day making calls and organizing a meeting. As happy as he was to see a blue sky and no demons, he was still waiting for the rug on this reality to be pulled out from under him. He sipped the whiskey on ice on Booth's couch, savoring the bitter bite on his tongue. You need to relax, Booth advised, despite wearing the same expression of apprehension as the Delta soldier. They heard the roar of motorcycles pull up in her driveway, then die instantly. They were quick to meet their first guests. When they opened the front door, they were pleased to see Bam Bam and Apache walking up the front steps. When the bikers saw their hosts, they ran the rest of the way, embracing with bear hugs and laughter. How can this be? Apache asked. We thought it was drugs, a bad trip maybe, Bam Bam added. It was real though, wasn't it? Apache asked. They hammered them with questions, not giving them any time to respond. Hey, you two! Cool it with the questions. Once everyone gets here, all will be explained, Scott insisted. Tarnay was the next to arrive, overjoyed to see the others. He was quickly followed by Saul and Sarah, who arrived together, then Vulcan and Jared. Rob and Lee arrived later, with Zeus and Cooper coming in last. With each arrival, the same questions were asked, in between the tears and laughter. People who cared deeply for one another, who had literally been to the gates of hell together and somehow managed to make it out alive and intact. The only ones absent were Gates, who was deceased, and Page, who was now only 8, with no way to be present. once they were all seated. Booth explained what had happened with the experiment and how Gates had sacrificed his own life to ensure that the experiment couldn't go ahead. Once that detail was out of the way, they managed to piece their fragmented memories together and fill in the blanks on their battle with Basul and how they had prevented the apocalypse. I can't believe it. In the end, Gates saved the world, Tarnay mused. With a little help from us, Apache was quick to add. You haven't changed at all, Saul laughed. I beg to differ. I'm not wasting this second shot at life, Apache replied. What about Paige? God, I miss that girl, Sarah said. I'm sure she's in the same boat as us, but no one's going to believe an 8-year-old girl and a wild story about demons and monsters, Jared explained. Geez, what a beautiful voice you have, big fella, Bam Bam cooed. Jared went red and they all laughed. I have money at my disposal. I plan on reaching out to her soon, letting her know that she's not alone. She'll never have to worry about her future. She'll be protected, just like my own daughter, Jared said protectively. There were cheers of approval from the group. If you do have plenty of money to throw around, think of me as the son you never had, Apache joked. How about I just throw you around instead? Jared replied to more good-natured cheering. What happens now? Cooper asked, changing the subject, eager to get down to business, and the mood of the group became somber. As Dr. Booth said earlier, the meteor and its 2 pieces are under tight security. To the company, they're worth billions. We also know that we can't allow that experiment to go forth, Scott said. What are you proposing then? Zeus asked. We did it before. This time we don't have to worry about demons stopping us. We steal the 2 fragments of the meteor and we ensure that they are never found again. Without them, the whole of the meteor is rendered useless. Correct me if I'm wrong? Scott asked. He's right. Those 2 pieces are the key to stopping this once and for all, Booth added. I just need to know who's in, Scott asked, and before he could call on hands, there was a resounding yes from everyone in the room. Scott smiled broadly. Epilogue. 2 nights later, under the cover of a new moon, Scott and the others made their move. The security that was on could not hope to defeat a team that had been working together for the past 8 years and who thrived in absolute darkness. Utilizing every skill, favor, and ability that they currently possessed, they invaded the sanctity of the Wagner Institute. Splitting evenly between 2 teams under the leadership of Scott and Saul, they hit the private security forces within and eliminated all threats, all without taking a single life. Using intelligence from Dr. Booth, they knew exactly where the 2 pieces were being held, and thanks to Apache, Bam Bam, and Scott, they had sufficient means to break them out of the 2 secure vaults where they were being kept. Knowing how their actions would appear to the authorities, they decided to wreak as much damage and chaos to the interior of the building before leaving. An anonymous call was made to the police, where they discovered the dozen security personnel bound and gagged safely in the car park, the building burning behind them. Not one of them was able to make any form of identification against their attackers. In the years to come, speculations would be made as to who was responsible, and more importantly, why. The only facts known were that the missing pieces of the meteor were never recovered, and that Operation DarkStar was completely abandoned 6 months later as the Wagner Institute went into bankruptcy and liquidation. Jared's company chartered a large deep-sea vessel, which they all took out at that same night. They dumped the larger of the 2 pieces 12 miles out from the coast. The second smaller shard was given to the doctor to dispose of. It only seems fitting if you take the honors, Saul insisted. Booth held the small black sliver in one hand, the other keeping herself steady as the boat rocked back and forward. "This is for Samuel. The man you all saw was not the man that I knew. His sanity might not have handled that 8-year nightmare, but he showed his true colors in the end," Booth said, to murmurs of agreement from the others. Staring down at the black rock one last time, she curled her fingers around it and with all her might tossed it towards the sky. It arced high and landed within the cold black waters unceremoniously. 2 hours later, they stood back on dry land, and for the first time in their memory, they looked apprehensive about the future. "What do we do now?" Apache said aloud, something they had all been thinking about during the ride back in. "As corny as this may sound, but we've been given a gift. Not many people can say that they've been given an honest-to-God second chance, but here we are. 14 people who have been to hell and back, now allowed a fresh start," Saul said. "And I, for one, am not going to waste it," Bam Bam said suddenly. "Which means," Sarah pressed, "I don't know if she'll remember me, but I'm going to find Molly and make her mine." Again, Bam Bam swore. "I could use a job," Tarnay shrugged. "And I can use a man who I know will have my back," Jared said, clapping a hand on the shorter man's shoulder. "Come see me tomorrow. We'll do lunch," he added with a chuckle. "And I'm done with the military. I'm done with the secrets and the killing," Scott announced. They talked until the night faded. The sun they had long been denied seemed to signal a new chapter in their lives, now offering them all unlimited new possibilities. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope you enjoyed the finale of Operation DarkStar and return soon to Crow's Quill's books, where the next tale awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.